All right, today we're going to be talking through a Maloof rocking chair. This has been a dream of mine since high school. It's a bucket list dream. So here I'm rough cutting lumber. My TS55 Festool Trek saw wasn't really doing the job. I don't have a 75, so using the bandsaw to rough cut. You'll see the arms, the back legs there, basically a bunch of rough cut. So first real component I focused on was the seat, and basically just glued up two pieces here. It's super important to keep in mind grain flow in this whole project. You want the grain to flow from the seat to the back braces to the headrest to the legs, etc. Here you'll see we're cutting 3" by 3" notch on the back there for the back legs. Up front we're cutting the front notch for the front legs. I want to say that's 2 inches wide or 2 inches wide by 1 inch deep, I believe. The jigs that I made here, so like the thing that's holding the router, allowing that to be a smooth, clean cut, can all be found on Hal Taylor's site. So here I'm using a 1/2 inch rabbiting bit. It's basically going to help me create my joint. Right here I'm cutting depth holes for the seat for the back braces. The tenons will go in those holes. And right there I'm drilling for depth holes. So those depth holes will let me know how much to carve into this seat. I'm using a cut saw wheel, and basically you just got to do your best and keep it by eye, sit in it, see how it feels. Again, keeping grain flow in mind. Basically, again, the most challenging part of this whole project, everything on here is almost an angled cut. So here we have like a 6-degree base turn on that bandsaw, and basically we're starting to shape here, getting away from square things, and everything's got to have a nice curvature, a nice aesthetic to it, as well as be comfortable. So here we're cutting out the shape, rough shape for the back legs, again on the bandsaw. I highly recommend Grizzly bandsaw. It has worked great for me so far. But yeah, the one thing I can say, keep the blade moving, keep the piece moving. Here we're cutting out the inside piece, so we're gonna save that piece. That's really important. We're gonna save that piece for later. But after you do that, I use some double edge tape to stick that template to the piece, and I'm just sanding to the template to get smooth. And right here, I lost the footage for the adder block I added, but you're gonna add an adder block to the inside and cut it at an 8-degree angle, and then you're gonna use the saw. If you've got like a dado set, great, that'll help you cut that joint a lot smoother. But then the inside edge that's gonna go into the chair, we've got a round over with a 3/4 round over bit. That rabbet joint creates a round corner, not a square corner, which I'll show you what that means here in a second. But you have to have that round over to fit into the round edge that rabbet bit made. So again, I said save that piece. So we're gonna move it to the outside and glue it. And what that'll do, that's where the armrest is gonna attach, and that'll allow us to have some extra width, which will allow for a lot fancier, more aesthetically pleasing transition when we attach those arms. So right here we're gluing it, but you'll see what I mean by that outer block down right below my arm. To the left of it, you'll see that it's a little thicker up top, a little thinner down low. Again, that's just an 8" or 8-degree cut, I believe. Everything was almost 6 to 8 degrees. So again, there's a book here. There's another 8 degrees. So that adder block we just added to the outside, we're gonna cut at an angle. So in the back, you wouldn't be able to tell, but up front, we're still gonna leave that thickness there. Here, we're just cutting off all the excess wood from those adder blocks that we added. We don't need it anymore, and we're just sanding off. Another Grizzly tool here. Here we actually tilted the bandsaw to a 20-degree angle, and we're just cutting the top portion of the legs, so the headrest, where the headrest meets, and rounding it over. I don't like using screws, so if I can avoid it, I will. This is a Festool domino joiner, where basically there's just going to be a domino tenon that goes into that hole, and we'll also cut one of these in the headrest, and it'll just hold right in. We'll glue it in and call it a day. Right now I'm just grinding the final shaping that I couldn't hit with that 3/4 inch round over bit, just using the cut saw wheel to round over, roughly. Alright, so again, just using Titebond glue. Good thing to keep in mind here is clamping pressure. So if I clamp side to side, I got to worry about the front to back moving. So I actually put a clamp from front to back as well as side to side, and that was a lot easier. in the end. Tried to do it just back to, or side to side, and it wasn't working. It was slipping. So here are the front legs, and they're going to start off as a block about 18 inches long, I believe 16, 18 inches long, 3 to 4 inches wide, and you'll see there that square piece, right? So you can see that the half-inch round over was creating that round corner. With it being square, it wasn't fitting. So here we rounded it over, and hopefully you see here what I mean. So that round over piece fits in that round corner. Again, we got to curve this piece though, so it's a block. We're going to do what we always do, add an adder block, and we're going to end up cutting it diagonal, but we're going to glue both front legs to one single adder block. So just alternating the top ends. So you'll see the top ends are at opposite ends there, but that's going to allow us to cut the angle you see here. And really it's following the template, so it's not like it's like a 13-degree angle or anything. It's got like a curve more so than an angle, I suppose, almost like a bowing, which will end up looking really good when you look at it from the front. And so you'll see what I mean here by the bowing. So we're going to bow it out right there, which will end up looking really, really sharp. So as always, we're going over the 3/4 round over. That little piece that is called a donut, it was just a really simple to make, but allows you to utilize that router. So I've lost the footage for these top blocks on these arms. Basically, they're just 8 inches long, 8/4 thick, about 3 inches wide, and they're transition pieces. So the armrests are going to sit on top of those, and we're going to grind those down later to transition well. So now we're in the headrest. You'll notice the A, B, C, D, E, F there. That's super important as we get into the layout, and the grain flow is why that's super, super critical. But basically, we're going to cut 6 pieces, 8 inches long, about 4 to 5 inches wide. So that's what I'm doing here, cutting all those pieces. And basically, you'll see what I mean here. So when you turn the pieces, you have to turn them this way for the grain to match. Basically, we're like book matching there. And so you get a nice grain flow by using the pieces that way. So if you need to watch that again, feel free to rewind. It's also in Hal Taylor's book that I mentioned. But basically, we're going to cut a 6-degree angle on each end. And that'll, in the end, 6 degrees times the 5 or 6 joints that there are, it's going to end up being like something like a 40-degree curvature overall or something like that. But you'll see what I mean here. Once you kind of cut an angle on each piece, it's going to end up getting that nice bow shape that you want out of a headrest. Canadian Woodworks and Gara Wood, those are their Instagram handles. They do their headrest a little differently. If I would have seen that, I would have done it that way. It would have been way simpler. So check them out. Look for alternate ways. But basically, we're just going to glue up 2 at a time. So we're going to have 3 sets of 2 since there's 6 pieces. We're just going to clamp 2 of them together. I saved those pieces I cut off from that table saw. So those angled cuts allowed me to like glue 2 at a time. You can't do that though when you're gluing all these pieces together just because it's bowed, so using a clamp won't work. So these are dog pinch clamps or dog clamps. I think they're known both ways, but pinch dogs maybe. But basically got them off Amazon. They work really well. They do leave like a mark because you're obviously hammering those in. So that's an important note. You know, we cut these 8 inches long, like I mentioned. You're going to end up cutting off each end. So you're going to end up with like 6 to 7 inches long, which is what we planned for. That's why we started with 8 inches. Here, I'm just cutting off like a 1/4 inch, and that's to match the width of my back legs on the top. Here, you'll see I'm cutting off the bottom to basically take those marks out from those clamps we just hammered in. Super simple. Easy peasy. All right. After that, so you'll see that first of all, that's like a 90-degree cut from the saw blade, but that slide I have was slanted out 6 degrees. So pay attention to that. Again, all that is laid out. Hal Taylor is the guy who has written a lot of books on this, so read his book. Highly recommend it. A lot of information in there. Right here, we're going to be cutting a bunch of laminations for the rockers. So laminations, just a bunch of 1/8 inch thick pieces. Rockers are made out of, I think I stacked 9 of the 1/8 inch pieces. I think you can go anywhere from, I'd say 7 to 11. Honestly, I wouldn't go below 8 or 7 myself. Like, I'd stick 9 would probably be my minimum, just because after seeing how much they bend after doing 9, I wouldn't want to go below that. Just want those to be as strong as possible. Although bulky is not aesthetically great. But anyway, we're just stacking them up, gluing them together. And the reason we do this is because it can bend. So when you have a bunch of thin laminations, They're flexible, but we're going to glue them together in that form, let it dry for 24 to 48 hours, and bada bing, bada boom, we golden. So after that, I'm going to cut a bunch of like 6-inch long, 8-inch long pieces there, and I'm gluing them. Those are like adder pieces that are going to help me have a curved transition where the legs attach. So instead of the legs just attaching to a blocky looking rocker, they're going to have a nice curve bowing that comes out of those pieces. You'll see what I mean here where I'm bandsawing them. So you're going to see like the curve I'm talking about. That's instead of it just attaching to the flat part of the rocker. Looks a lot better. Okay. So after we complete that, I actually did use screws to attach the rockers to the legs. I missed a square cut at some point, so the bottom of my legs didn't end up matching like I wanted, which is why I used screws. Couldn't do it the way the clamps were supposed to work as instructed. So again, right here, we're cutting more laminations, this time thinner than 1/8, but these are for back braces. So same process, we're just cutting them thinner, and you're not going to stack as many. It's like 4 or 5. So I want to say I did like 1 maple, 1 walnut, and then 3 maple, I believe, just so that walnut piece would add an accent. Although I did alternate, I did 2 chairs. So one, I did the opposite of that. I did 1 walnut, 1 maple, 3 walnut. But you guys can do whatever you want. That's the cool part about this. So here I just stacked them up, took them to the table saw to cut the tenons, then took them to the bandsaw to cut a nice curve from those tenons. But these tenons are going to fit in the headrest holes that we drilled, as well as the seat ones that we drilled early on. They're going to fit right in there. We're just rounding them over on that spindle sander. This was like the best investment I've ever made. It was like $150 from Grizzly when I got it. It was like a spring summer sale. And yeah, it was just a great investment. Highly recommend it for this project especially. Here we're cutting for the arms. So the arms were one of the parts I thought was going to be most challenging, but turned out to be one of the easiest if planned for. So here we're using that same 6-degree like splaying out. So just going crosswise on that saw blade. The saw blade is rounded though, right? So we're raising it a 1/64 of an inch each time we cross over. And that cove that's created will fit someone's arm really comfortably, as well as look really good. Here we're sticking a domino in the end. That way it can attach to the chair. We're cutting out just the rough shape of the armrest here on the bandsaw. Going over to that 3/4 roundover bit. You'll see that they look pretty thick. I wish I would have bandsawed the bottom width out of those a little more. Those ended up being a little thicker than I was planning. And I wish I would have caught that, but I did not until the chair was done. But here we're just gluing them to we just glued those armrests to those blocks that I mentioned. We're going to take the angle grinder, and you'll notice that right here I'm starting to grind down on that arm to make that transition look really good, not blocky. And yeah, you'll see a world of a difference. This is where they really start coming together for sure. I do recommend, if you can, sand each piece before you put it together. I did not do that, even though I knew I was supposed to, just because I was unsure of my cuts being what they were supposed to be angled wise. So I was going to sand it all once I had it together to make it look better, but it ended up being a lot of work, a lot harder, I think, than it could have been. And for the finish, I used 1/3 tung oil, 1/3 boiled linseed oil, 1/3 Armor Seal, and just put a couple coats of that on, let it dry for 48 hours in between. And after I did that, I did do a couple coats on the seat of straight Armor Seal just to protect that where it gets a lot of wear. But it turned out really, really nice. I'm so happy I did this project. It was the most challenging thing of my life, but with it being a bucket list item, I had to do it. And it turned out really well. I may do some down the road, but I will do a lot of projects in between them that are a lot easier. I'll have to gain up my stamina to crank these out again. But yeah, they turned out really well. I highly recommend this. I'm no professional. I'm a 23-year-old that played around in high school with this stuff, and I would consider myself like the beginning of the intermediate stage. So anyone can do this. And if you have questions, feel free to reach out. I will answer any questions I see. So have a good one, guys.